How's it going, guys? Believe it or not, I actually just got back from the dentist. You probably can't even tell, but I had to get a few fillings because I guess I've been eating on them Sour Patch Kids too much. But as you can see, I was completely immune to the numbing stuff. It had absolutely no effect on me. My lip is a piece of lunch meat on my face as normal. My chin feels like a raw chicken drumstick. When I try to scrunch my nose, only one nostril goes up. Everything's just as normal. So I figured since I'm doing so well, I might as well take this time to start my tutorial on the pistol crossbow. So I hope you guys enjoy the video. So initially I was going for like a Deadpool paint job, but after I finished it, it looked a little bit more like a Black Widow. So I was trying to get kind of creative, and I wanted to combine the name Black Widow and Widowmaker, but in the end I decided against it because I was afraid that if I called it the Black Widowmaker, then people would associate me with the KKK. So in the end I just decided to name it the Sexually Ambiguous Asian Single. So as you can see, the Sexually Ambiguous Asian Single has a double pulley system, which by the way is completely unnecessary. Like I explained in the last video, I was really just experimenting. The only reason you would ever need a double pulley system is if the limbs were about this long, but the track was like way longer, because this provides a lot more string for you to pull back. But something that's really cool about it is that the limbs are rigid. They're powered by these clamps that I've modified to be able to accept the pulleys and the string. And the other really cool thing about it is the cocking mechanism. It's got these two hooks up here that run all the way up here and around here and connect to each other. So all you do is just pull on this little handle back here, and it draws the string all the way to the back, and it locks itself in place. I have no idea if this is even gonna work, because if you can't tell, when I build these things on my channel, this is really the first time that I've actually built them. So hopefully this does work, because if it does, it's gonna be really freaking cool. To make the body of it, I'm using these two different thicknesses of birch plywood. We've got some 6mm birch and some 9mm birch down here. So first things first, I gotta cut out my design. I'm gonna use this X-Acto knife, and in case you're new to my channel, sorry, I don't do printout templates because I want you guys to put your own creativity into this stuff. So I'm gonna put this on top of a piece of cardboard and then cut it out. Make sure you hold on to both of the pieces, because there's different things that both pieces are used for. So I'm going to trace this guy out on the 9mm plywood 2 times, and on the 6mm I'm going to trace it out 1 time. And always remember, you can save time and resources, i.e. money, by lining up the longest straight cuts with the edges of the board. This way you're not wasting any of the wood up here. You don't have to take the wear and tear on your blade from cutting this long straight cut. It's just all around better. So I'm going to cut all these guys out with my scroll saw, and if you don't have one of these things, you can use a jigsaw. Don't worry if you don't get the edges all perfect, because once we get everything glued together and filed down and sanded, all the stuff is going to line up in the end. So this took about 30 or 40 minutes to do, and then I went to the bathroom. So right about now my tongue is pretty much back to normal, but my lip not so much. And right about now I'm really hoping I remembered to wash my hands. So anyways, this middle piece right here, since I cut it out the exact same size as these other things, there's pretty much a flat surface on the top, and that's because I forgot one of the more important things. For the middle piece, what I normally do when I'm making crossbows is, instead of lining this top edge up perfectly with this thing, I'll scoot it up a little bit, about 1/4 of an inch. So this way when you cut it out, this top line right here is lower than the other 2 lines, so you have a track in there for your arrow to run down. To fix that, I just gotta cut off the top edge with the scroll saw. It's no big deal. Here's how it looks with the middle trimmed down. So now that we have this piece, we have to put some tracks on both sides of the main track for the loading mechanism, and to do that we're gonna use the stencil positive. We're gonna cut out 4 pieces. The first 2 pieces follow this edge all the way till here, and then it's just a straight line to this point, 3/4 of an inch from the top. And then it's just a straight line all the way to the back here, like this. The 3rd and 4th pieces are the same thing, except with the top edge scooted up 1/4 of an inch like I showed you before. So I've got these 4 parts all clamped together, and I'm gonna clean up the inside edge of this part right here with my belt sander, because that would be the most difficult part to get to once it's all clamped up together with this thing. Here's how that edge looks now as compared to, you know, the other edges. And then I'm gonna clamp 2 of these on one side and then 2 on the other side. And once we've got all the pieces clamped up, now we're gonna round out the rest of the edges. And I know this looks like a lot of wood, but trust me, it's gonna be cool when it's finished. And after you got all the edges lined up and the splinters cleaned off, then we're gonna glue these 2 pieces together and these 2 pieces together. Now before we can glue these 3 pieces together and then glue these on the sides, we have to figure out what the trigger and the trigger mechanism is gonna look like, so that we'll be able to cut out a little chunk from the spacer in the middle and make a housing for the trigger and the mechanism. So I'm thinking I'm gonna have to get a new SD card for my camera, because for whatever reason this one keeps on corrupting my video files. But basically all you guys need to know is that both halves of this trigger were cut out of 1/8" bar stock steel from the hardware store using an angle grinder. So now that I got both halves cut out, I took the angle grinder and I ground down one of the inside faces. So now when you put both halves together, there's this little gap right here. This is where the spring is going to tuck into and get fixed in there with the epoxy. It's alright if it's not centered, because this is going to be hidden by everything anyways, and really doesn't matter. So I'm going to mix up and spread the epoxy on both of the inside halves here, put the spring inside of it, and then clamp it up and let it dry. You're going to cut the top part of the mechanism out of just some regular 1/4" steel. You don't have to do the 2 pieces and epoxy them together because there's no springs attached to it. And I would suggest drilling the hole before you cut the piece out, just so that you can clamp up stuff. It's a lot more difficult to deal with the tiny little piece, but if you have to, just clamp it in a vise and then drill through it with a hand drill. So I had to trim everything down because the trigger was kind of squishing your finger when you would pull it all the way, but now I think I've got everything pretty good. So you can pretty much see the mechanics of it here. This part is being pulled forward by the string that has tension on it, and there's a little notch right there that the trigger is resting inside of. So when you pull the trigger, it undoes the notch, and then it lets go of the string, and then that is sitting right there. So once you pull the string back again and it pushes on this piece, it re-engages the trigger. And yeah, the trigger is a little wimpy now, but I mean, if you can fire the crossbow, I say it's long enough. So I've taken a pen and just vaguely traced out the full range of motion of the whole thing, but make sure when you do this, you do give some space around all the pieces, just to make sure that there's no fatal mistakes once you actually glue everything together. So now I'm going to take some of this tracing paper and trace out all these lines and use them as a guide to cut a chunk out from the middle spacer, so that there's a little housing for the trigger mechanism to go inside. It's Casper. So now that we've got all the cutting done, we can start gluing on these brackets that'll become the tracks for the cocking mechanism. We're going to start with this one that goes behind the piece that we already drilled the holes in. And now I'm a little concerned about these thin areas right here, so I'm going to be taking some of these 3/4" wire nails and hammering them into it. Now, they're just long enough that they'll go most of the way into the 9mm plywood, but they're not so long that they're going to stick out the other side and make fitting stuff together really difficult. Now, hammering these long, thin nails into regular wood would have been difficult enough, but with it being plywood, they came out looking pretty nasty. So when we're done here, I'm just going to glue a little bit of 3mm plywood just to cover up all that nastiness. But next, we're going to glue the spacers onto the piece that already has the holes drilled through it. Now take your final measurements, make sure everything lines up, make sure all the moving parts can move freely when they're inside, because we're going to glue the 2 halves together now. And here we have the chunkiest rubber band gun of all time. But in all seriousness, rubber bands are a really good way to see if your trigger mechanisms work before you actually put the limbs on. And as you can see,